I have Lianna Patch here. Lianna is a professional copywriter. She is a speaker, a comedian, and what's cool is she combines comedy with conversion copywriting. So basically, she writes stuff that has people laugh and then pull out their wallets and buy the thing that her client is selling. And so you can learn more about her at punchlinecopy.com. Lianna, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
What is, let's start with this. Why is copywriting important? It might sound obvious, but for a lot of people watching this who sell services, they may be used to selling on the phone where they can kind of like, they can pivot, oh, that, this person has this objection, so I can just answer that. Why is learning the skill of copywriting important for someone, especially if they're in a service-based business?
I think people who are good on the phone have an advantage when it comes to writing copy. I'm not going to answer your question kind of obliquely, like why is
Yeah,
copywriting
yeah,
important?
yeah.
Because if you are skilled at sort of leading a sales conversation, then you already have the skills you need to write copy. And that's actually a trick that you can use is just record yourself having one of those conversations and turn that into your page draft. But basically, copywriting is the art of persuading people in words to take an action. I like to think of it as distinct from content, which is more around like education. So education is at the top of the funnel. People are interested in you. And then down here is when you get to copy and you start telling them to do something, right? And like, who doesn't want to have the skill to persuade people to do things? It's arguably the most important power that we have. I could be a dictator of a small country right now, but I chose to run a business instead.
I like it. I like it. Why use comedy in copywriting?
Oh my God, how much time do you have? How
We
much
have
time
60 minutes,
does everyone watching
55
this
minutes.
have left on Earth? Uh, Humor and comedy and laughter do so many things for us as humans. They are arguably like I think, the best social glue that we have. There are cognitive impacts on humor. So when you hear a joke, you're more likely to remember the information that preceded that joke or that comes right after that joke. There are social impacts. So when someone makes you laugh, you have affinity for them, right? You like them more. You're more willing to forgive them when they inevitably mess up. And if they deliver their apology with a little bit of well-placed humor, you're more likely to accept that apology. And then cultivating a sense of comedy, a sense of humor in your own brain actually makes you a more resilient person. There's a reason that humor is a coping mechanism and a skill that you can develop. Like, there are just so many benefits in all facets of life. And the one that I find most applicable to people who come to me is improv. So, like, if you have never taken an improv class, the skills that you learn, the parts of your brain that you start to turn on in improv, make the rest of your life so much more fun. Like, you're in the grocery store, but your improv brain is working, and you're like, what if I were a carrot right now? And you start doing an improv scene, hopefully with your partner who's game for that.
Well, I'm curious. That makes me think of an insight I had the other day, which is I am usually not, I usually don't have that funny part of my brain turned on. I feel like there's a flow you can get into where you're like, okay, I'm just going to be silly. And then you're funnier in some contexts than others. Like I've noticed we have with some friends locally, we have like Taco Tuesday, and it's a group of maybe 8 to 10 on average. And I feel like I get good laughs at Taco Tuesday. But in other contexts, I feel like I'm almost not even engaging that part of me. And I'm curious if you feel like people have certain things that help them get into a funny mode, because I think that'll translate when we talk about copywriting.
Oh, for sure. But my first question when you said that was, how comfortable are you with your friends at Taco Tuesday? And does that like level of comfort have something to do with your ability, your willingness to go out
Mm.
on a limb and make a joke?
I am comfortable in that setting. I feel very accepted for like who I am. And I feel like there's an audience component now that we're talking
Oh yeah.
about it. Like, I think I'm maybe less funny with my wife Emma one on one because I'm just like, I don't know, I'm just with her. But it's like if I can get those laughs, I feel like I have more reinforcement because also Emma doesn't laugh at my jokes, so I get better reinforcement, better reinforcement at Taco Tuesday. So I probably do it more because of that.
I literally dumped somebody because they never laughed at my jokes. So
That might be harsh. I'm sure she laughs sometimes. She just thinks I'm dumb. Like, I mean, you always think your partner is like a little bit
yes, I'm
silly.
not telling you to divorce your wife, just to be clear.
Yeah, what are you trying to do?
Destroy your marriage in a single podcast. Sorry, Emmett. No, I'm just kidding. Um, yeah, I think there is something to that comfort aspect. There is something to the expectation of performance. I find that that little part of me turns on more when I'm like a speaker at a conference. So every time I go down into the area where everybody's mingling, I know that they're expecting me to be the funny version of me and like the entertainer, you know. And my way of doing that is just to be a huge idiot. So it doesn't work for everyone. Yeah, I think it really does come down to permission and comfort and willingness to go out on that limb, take a few risks, make some jokes, and be willing to be the center of attention, even if it's just for like one punchline.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like not, obviously not taking yourself too seriously too, because I have times when I write copy or content and it's more, I'm more in a serious mood, and other times I'm more in a silly mood. And obviously, like the silly mood is when I put more comedy in.
Yeah. Well, I didn't even, so I touched on all the like the benefits of humor and comedy, but I didn't even mention anxiety relief, which is a huge studied benefit of humor. So like if you're writing a sales page and you're like, oh man, this is really important stuff and I'm like getting to the heart of the matter, but it's coming off as a little bit too salesy, like maybe you go through and you identify a time when you've ramped up the anxiety so much that someone risks being like, I can't deal with this right now. I'll come back later. And you put a little joke in there to sort of ease the tension, you know, like release the pressure a little bit. That's a valve, not me tweaking into,
Yeah.
yeah.
That makes sense.
To
That
be clear.
makes sense. Yeah, so having humor and comedy is helpful for obviously the reader or the potential customer, help them kind of relax, relate to you. And I think it is also helpful for the writer just because content's more fun when you can, make jokes in it
Oh,
and it's not this serious thing.
yeah.
Um, let's talk about incongruity because I feel like it's weird to talk about like why jokes work, like why is stuff that's funny funny, but I feel like you kind of need to understand it if you want to improve the skill. If we're feeling like okay, you're not just born funny, it's something you can work on.
Yeah.
Explain incongruity because I feel like that's key to making stuff hit and copy.
Oh, for sure. So there are so many different theories of why humor, why comedy, what's happening in the brain. A lot of them have sort of been debunked. Not all of them cover every single joke you'll ever find, which is why there are so many. But the main accepted one is called incongruity resolution theory, and that suggests that when we hear a joke, the funny happens when we have an expectation, there's something incongruous that happens that makes us go like, huh? And then our brain goes through this process of like, is this what we expected? No. Is this like surprising, delightful, weird? And that's where the laugh comes from. And then actually on the other side of that equation, if it's not surprising or delightful and weird, that's where you get like absurd humor, where the joke comes from the lack of resolution. You're like
Hmm.
waiting to get it, and then you get that there's nothing to get, and you laugh at yourself for just being taken for so long, or you laugh at the joke for just being so stupid, or nothing like a nothing burger. I'm not explaining this well. Am
No, it makes sense. It's like incongruity is when it's not what you expect, like the way it starts off and it ends differently. And I think you gave good examples too in one of your posts about like the rule of three. And I feel like this was a really helpful, clear takeaway of just how to
Yeah.
use comedy in your copy. So could you explain a little bit of that, how that
Yeah,
works?
so yeah, I love that you mentioned the rule of three because that's one of the many places where copy and comedy converge. So the rule of three is a series of three items in your writing, and humans for some reason just really like three. It's the smallest number you can have in a series that feels like a complete set. So it's like tickles that part of your brain that's like, it's done. I get it. But the way we use it in comedy is you'll have two things like, duck, duck, goose. And then goose is like, ooh, didn't expect that. And so there's so many different ways to use this joke wise. You can do like normal thing, weird thing. Generally, you can do uh, like thing that you would expect, and then very specific thing that you don't expect. Let me think of an example. I like pina coladas, long walks on the beach, and the 75th digit of pi, or so. I don't know, like something that just is so weirdly off base that you're like, oh, that's kind of funny. Of
Yeah.
course, I showed up like as my funny self today. Um,
That's the pressure that you must feel to hit.
I do.
Like, do you feel like you're in a if you're in a consult with a client, do you like I'm gonna have to get one banger in here?
No, because there is a massive part of my brain that is completely useless except for really dumb wordplay. And that part is always listening. And so usually someone will say something and I'll be like, or what about this? And they're like, oh, I'm like, got it. But I can't do math, can't do
Other
like
people, I feel like other people probably try to be funny around you.
people try to be funny and often succeed. I'm lucky to be surrounded by a lot of funny people. But the weird thing is, and this might just be like a parasocial effect, because I'm so like forthcoming and kind of crass and personal in my marketing, people write to me as if they know me really well. They're like,
Hmm.
"What's up, crazy lady? Anyway, here's the thing." And I'm like, "We've never met. Who are you? Why are you in my inbox?"
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so we talked about incongruity. Let's talk about some other ways where people can make this actionable, use more comedy in their copywriting.
Yeah.
One of the things that I had here was comic book words.
Oh yeah. Onomatopoeia. So like when you are reading something and you read a description of a sound or a noise, your brain will like try to hear that for you. And it just using those words is a way to light up different parts of the brain that you would normally do if you're just reading something. So like how can you try to use all of the senses of your reader even if they're just reading? So like boom, crash, bang, or like asterisk, sound of the front door opening and me peeking in, you know. They're gonna hear
Hmm.
like it's yeah.
Yeah.
That's one way. Another way to work in more comedy, to work in more humor, that I often tell people, especially who run like personality or service-based businesses, like you know your audience really well, you know what they struggle with, and those problems and objections are a great place to put in some humor that's like, hey, I get it. Like, we've all been there. When you open your inbox and there's 50 emails from the client and they're all asking you the deadline that's at the top of the Asana project and you just want to slam it shut and like move to Ontario. Apologies if anyone's in Ontario. It's a great place to live. Uh, like, make a list of those objections and then poke a little fun at them in a way that positions you on the same side as your reader, because you don't want to offend them, you don't want to insult them. And sometimes, if you're in a position of authority, you don't want to poke fun at yourself either. You don't want to be self deprecating. So, this kind of like observational humor, we're making fun of this thing that lives out there in the world that we can both see, but it's not threatening to you or me, is a really safe way to start playing with jokes.
Mm, that makes sense. That makes me think of a, I don't know if anyone found it funny in my audience, but this is like a very niche thing that only coaches would get. There was some blog post that I started off and it was about like how to become a better coach or something. It was like, how can you tell like whether someone's a good coach or not? And it's like, A, the amount of money they make. This uses the rule of three as well. A, the amount of money they make. Two, like, how many repeat clients they get. Or three, like how big their Wheel of Life tattoo is on their back. And
Yeah.
Wheel of Life is like, it's like a diagnostic that a lot of life coaches use.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like that insider knowledge, I
Yes.
feel like if you can make a joke out of that, it's kind of two birds with one stone.
Yes, exactly. Like you have this specialized knowledge of whatever your coachees do. So use that to show them, like, I'm actually in this with you. I get it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, Yeah, another thing I liked, I don't know if this was under the comic book sounds heading, but I wanted to mention it, was like making your call to action buttons more interesting. Like I think you gave an example of like, drop kick this like into your
Yeah.
cart or something like that. And I was like, oh, that's good. That's fun.
Yeah. Okay. Nobody wants to learn more. I hate that CTA. Kill that with fire. Uh, but like CTA is written in first person. I want to be this, or I want this. I want to do this. I am this person. Those are always more fun because we read those in first person. Um, I wrote a landing page recently for a software tool that helps people retire spreadsheets. And so one of the buttons on the page was take your spreadsheets out behind the barn. Like, I might have written
Yeah.
kill spreadsheets with fire actually as a button.
Yeah, yeah.
Super specific, and like long button copy is not necessarily bad because obviously there's
Oh,
more
that's good to know.
text here for the eye to see. Yeah, like how can you make this button so irresistibly fun to click, or this link?
Hmm.
instead of just underlining click here and linking. Like, oh, this makes me so sad.
Yeah, that makes sense. The the third thing I want to talk about in terms of the how-to, how to use comedy is just this great example you gave about sort of diffusing a situation that could be awkward. You had this blog post, which I'll link to for people, that was like, here's a way to follow up with clients in a funny way when
Oh,
they're ghosting you, basically, right? And like, I have something that I teach called the magic email for that, but it's not funny. Like, it's actually sort of like confronting. Like, it's
yeah,
basically like, hey, like, since I haven't heard back from you on this, I'm going to assume that, you've gone another direction. Thanks, Greg. And like, you just send that and you usually get a response very quickly because they're like, oh, I'm a bad person. Like, I should have
yeah.
responded. But yours are way better because I feel like they force the issue while inserting humor. And I wanted to read this one because you probably don't remember them off the top of your head. I woke up at 3 a.m. thinking about this project, very sweaty, haha. Would love to know if you're still game to kick off next week. Like, that's so perfect.
Well, to be fair, that post was definitely not all real things that I would actually send. That was more of a humor
Fair.
piece. But yeah, so you were sending a version of what copywriters call the 9-word email, which I think Dean Jackson either came up with or started naming.
Hmm.
And it's, hey Greg, still interested in this thing? No sign off, no thank you. That's it. Just that open loop. And that always gets a reply. And so I actually like that a little bit better than just being like, I'm done with you. Love Greg, you know, because because it just, how are you going to ignore that? So
Yeah.
another version of that I send is, instead of like just circling back or just looping back, I send like, hey, Greg, just the gentlest butterfly wingtip nudge of a reminder that I'm waiting on this from you. Do you still want to do whatever? No worries either way, no hard feelings either way. Smiley face. Like, I make it so easy for them because, like, I don't want to work with somebody if they're not super jazzed, but I would like an answer.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense. And I feel like if you send that follow-up email in a way where they're made wrong, now they almost can't respond because you're gonna like lock them up.
Yeah.
Versus if you make it
Yeah.
totally okay to respond, then they can kind of let go of the fact they haven't responded and just do it.
Yeah, and you can, I mean, I hesitate to put words in people's mouths, but I will sometimes say, like, totally okay if it's not feeling like a fit or right now is not feeling like the right time. Because, especially I think in the coaching space, if someone's hesitating on pulling the trigger to like work with you, they haven't named those feelings, they haven't processed them, they actually don't know what they think, they just feel that resistance. And like, boy, what if they had a coach to help them work through stuff like that? But in the meantime, you can be like, I'm going to take the burden off you. Like, please just respond yes or no.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. What if what if you're not naturally funny? Like, what if someone feels like, well, I could put more humor in my copy, but that's just not really what my brand is. Like, I don't make jokes in real life. It's a very intense, serious brand, so why would I use humor?
Don't use it. Nope, not everybody
Don't
has.
use it. That makes sense.
If it
Stay
feels,
congruent with the brand.
yeah, like don't shoehorn in anything that feels like you're performing. I get, occasionally I'll get a client request that's like, I'm not funny at all, and I want you to make me seem really funny. I'm like, well, what are you gonna do when you show up in real life and you're not funny? Like, what are you gonna do when there's
Yeah,
this huge mismatch between your website copy? So I'm always trying to write something that still at the end of the day feels like authentic to them. I hate, authentic is such a buzzword now, but it's important. And yeah, if it doesn't feel right and it feels forced, then don't force it. Not everybody has to be funny, you know.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like someone whose text game is really strong in dating and they're like hilarious via text, but then you meet them and you're like, wait, like with time you did okay
Yeah.
because you had time, but now in real life you don't
Yeah.
have
It's like processing. You're just like waiting for them. Where's the
it.
day that I was coming to expect? Yeah. Yeah, I'm
So
the opposite of that. I have great text game. And then sometimes if you meet me in person, I'm like, I'm tired. I have nothing for you.
I think that's
Down.
fair. I think I'm the same way. Let's zoom out beyond just comedy and talk about copywriting in general because I feel like if someone's listening to this and they're very new to copywriting, we're kind of talking about how to enhance like it's comedy is almost a layer on top of the foundations of good copy that someone needs. And I noticed that when I switched from doing one-on-one calls primarily to having sales pages and things like that in my business, yes, some of that translated over, especially just the market research of knowing the words my clients were using on the
Yeah.
calls. But it was a new skill, like it was a different way of selling. So, like, where should people start when they're thinking about like, how do I write good copy? Like, what are the main things I should have in mind?
Yeah. Well, we talked about, not starting with a blank page, starting with a transcript of a sales call to see how you actually sell people, like if you're recording those. I always like starting with something. It's always easier to edit and add than it is to just like sit down in front of the white bowl, You can use a simple framework, problem, agitation, solution. What is the problem that they're facing? How can you make it like really feel like it needs to be solved right now? That's the agitation piece. And then how can you show them that you have the solution that they're looking for? That's a classic framework. You don't really need another one.
What
One
if
thing,
someone says like, I don't like the idea of agitating someone's problem?
then I don't know, you better be really charismatic on your sales calls or like have a really great referral network. Uh, there is that resistance to like salesy, sleazy, scammy copy that is way too pushy, and for good reason, right? There's so much of that in the coaching space. It's like if you don't book with me right now, then like you're not ready to evolve. My rule is let's not make people feel bad for not doing the thing. Do the thing. There is that element of risk and loss, that and anxiety that you do need to push people sometimes, but that's not my main focus. And I kind of wish that it wasn't other copywriters' main focus, but a lot of like classic direct response sales copy is written that way. I understand the concern. You do have to agitate a little bit, and usually the way that we do that is something through future pace, is something called future pacing. So, 5 years from now, did you make this choice? Where are you? Are you still working your same job that you hate? Are you still struggling with this issue, or have you taken a small step toward evolving, or whatever that thing is? Like help them do what human brains are not naturally good at doing, which is think about the future.
That makes sense. Yeah, if someone doesn't perceive, the problem as a significant problem or the goal as something that's worthwhile, they're
Yeah.
obviously not going to put in the work or make the, financial investment to do it. So I
Yeah.
almost see it as like I think if it's more palatable for people to think of that agitation almost as like active empathy, like being like, all right, right now, let's say it's a like a weight loss product, and it's like, all right, right now, like you want to lose a few pounds, whatever, that's the main thing. But it could be like there's also something to like the person that you'd be excited to become if like you really like stuck to something, got in really great shape and how good that would feel. Like that's going to be almost a bigger benefit than just talking about like you want to lose a few pounds, our product helps you do that. Buy
Yeah.
now.
It's not that you want to lose a few pounds, it's that you want to be a person who can successfully lose a few pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that language of transformation almost has its own separate vocabulary in the coaching space, transformation being one of those keywords. Um, and it is a good thing to point out that if you can't really promise outcomes, like specific outcomes, like I'll grow your business by X% in 6 months, you can hopefully, potentially promise emotional outcomes like that. Like, regardless of whether your business doubles over the next 6 months, you will feel more confident that you are the person who can be running that business at that size or whatever it is.
Yeah, I feel that that's something that people get really hung up on in my audience is when they have a less tangible niche. And then they're like, all right, well, this is fine for you to say if you're helping people get clients or make more money.
Yeah,
But what about me? I'm helping with something that's very internal, mindset. So how do I really speak to something that's an outcome or something that's tangible when it's not tangible?
yeah. That's where I go back to customer research and I say, like, okay, clearly there's something about your personality that is making people choose you. Have you asked those people, what made you trust me? What brought you to me, but what made you feel like I was the right one for you? And they will come back with, oh, we had this conversation about this thing, and the way you spoke about it made me feel like less judged or encouraged or whatever. Those are the kinds of insights that then go into your copy. It's like, if you're looking for someone who helps you feel accountable but not judged, that's me. Like, I walk that line with you. Taking those little nuggets from your customer research and pointing to those sort of emotional intangibles. It's really hard to do, but it is totally possible.
That makes sense. Yeah, I feel like using the words of your clients is
Oh, yeah.
just
Classic.
key. It's key. Okay, so we've gotten some good, like I think that's another good general copywriting principle.
Oh, yeah.
What else do you even have like a checklist for yourself? Like when you go to write a sales page, and you're like, all right, make sure I hit these things or it's
Um,
not done.
I do. From more of a conversion standpoint, so like, is design supporting the copy in a way that the copy is really easy to parse, or am I adding extra work for people, making their eyes tired? So simple things like, do I have sections with clearly labeled headers that are descriptive? So if I stand back from the page, do I still know what the page is about? Um, that kind of thing. Like, are buttons easy to see? Do they have enough white space? What are my visuals? That kind of thing. Um, Checklist wise, one thing that I wish more people would do, and this is across industries, is use social proof like testimonials if you're a coach. Use those next to the claim in the copy that they support. So if you have someone
Mm.
talking about like what made them go looking for a coach, that would probably be near the section of your copy where you're like talking about their problems, right? If you have someone talking about how great their results have been, that's probably lower down the page near to where you talk about what you can help them achieve. Don't just lump all of your testimonials into one section because a large proportion of people won't even get to that section. Instead,
Mhm.
use them where they will do the most work.
That's so good. I'm so excited about that tip because it makes so much sense.
Yeah,
And then also when you have like the testimonial section, like between the two calls to action, it's like it just ends up to be a lot. So you're asking a lot of like for them to digest multiple testimonials there.
yeah.
That makes a ton of sense to place them throughout, but in a place where you're making a claim.
Yeah, it's like letting your people tell your story for you. We'd always rather look at what someone says about you than what you say about yourself.
How do you feel about video sales letters? And I asked because I had been doing like I just been doing written sales pages for my course launches for multiple launches, and it worked pretty well.
Hmm.
Um, and then I did like a kind of like 3 video launch with video at the end as the sales page with the button, and that thing did not get signups. It did not get signups, and that was also a new format for me. So it's not to say video can't convert,
Yeah.
but do you ever, I mean, you're a copywriter, so you're not necessarily like probably doing as much of this, but what are your thoughts on selling via video versus via written words?
I think VSLs, video sales letters, are kind of the domain of that like direct response copywriter who gets paid in royalties, to beat the control of this like financial product or supplement, neither of which are my niche really. So I haven't written a ton of them. I've written a couple sales pages based on VSLs. Selling with video, super possible if you are charismatic enough, I think. Like, it, if the product is good, if the offer is good, if you seem trustworthy, then it can totally work. But I see that happening more on like live webinars or
Yeah,
social media.
webinars.
Yeah, like where you're giving some kind of value while you're on video, not just talking or saying the same script that's on the page. I do think in the coaching niche, having video is more important than in other niches because it really does come down to like, do I like this person's face and the way that their voice sounds, and do I trust them? And that's a good shortcut to deciding if you can trust them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do I really want to be on Zoom
Yeah.
looking at this dude, twice a month? So
Yeah.
that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Any other common mistakes that you see when people go to write copy, write a sales page, write emails to their list?
Again, we don't have time for all of these, but the like formatting, going back to formatting, um stop centering your body copy. I want to just like grab people and shake them. Like, if you're writing a sales page and you have body copy, it should be left aligned in a centered column. The column width should be no wider than 600 pixels. That is so that when I'm on my desktop and I'm in my browser and I'm reading back and forth, my eyes don't have to go like this There's like, and if you have your copy centered, the lines don't start at the same place. So I have to like, it's so much visual fatigue and it makes your message really hard to understand. So that's the biggest change you can make right now. Go left align any copy that's longer than like 2 sentences.
Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that the thing I immediately think of with that is just text size in general.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know what I
16
mean?
point is your best friend. 14 to
16
16
point.
point minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I think, I mean, the design, I don't necessarily, I'm curious what your take on this. Like, I don't think, design is not going to sell your product, but terrible design on your sales page could just have people bounce and
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
read the message.
I think the worse your design is, the stronger your copy has to be. You can obviously sell an amazing product with just a Google Doc, or you can sell your personality with just a Google Doc. But yeah, even if you have the best website in the world and you're not, your inauthenticity is coming through, or the product's not clear, the offer's not clear, you're not going to sell.
Hmm. I'm curious because a lot of people in who are watching this, like I know one thing coaches struggle with, especially early on, and other kind of service-based business owners, consultants struggle with finding their niche, their place in the market that's
Mhm.
unique and uses kind of a lot of them. I think sometimes people put too much burden on the business. They're like, it has to involve all of my hobbies must be in my brand now. But I really love that you have this comedy side of you that you've brought into uh, conversion copywriting, especially because like people pay for, I mean, not people obviously pay for comedy as well, but like people pay for copywriters. Like it's just the thing people buy because it helps them make more money. And I think coaches like could sometimes do a better job being like, how do I not sell coaching but sell money, but do it in a way that brings in my gifts. And so how did you even find this convergence of like copy and comedy that seemed like so right for you?
Oh man, I was just doing improv and stand up, and I joined the Copywriter Mastermind, the first iteration of that with Joanna Weeb. And I was like, oh, I wish there were some way to combine this thing that I love so much with this job that feels like putting on a mask every day and, writing like, Dear Sir and or Madam, which I wasn't doing, but like definitely felt like I was playing the role of the successful business person in my inbox and then like going off and being a carrot on stage. And Joanna was like, why don't you just do that? And I was like, whoa, man. So I don't know. I think we get into questions of brand there, like what do you want to be remembered for? Uh, and it can be really simple. I have a bookkeeping friend. She is actually a mindset coach for bookkeepers and accountants. And her thing is like her cats. So instantly I was like, oh, I love this girl. Um, but like, I cats are also my thing. You can bring your thing in a way that makes you memorable and is not your whole business. Um, I think between 3 to 5 of those unique characteristics that you mention often in your content makes you like, oh, that's the coach who does this thing. I remember because he plays tennis all the time.
Hmm.
Yeah. It was kind of a roundabout answer.
Yeah, I feel like, yeah, so bringing in certain hobbies, even if they're not super related to what you do, will help fill you out as a human, the same way comedy will help like create that rapport. And I
Yeah.
think one of the things I take away from you is you're just like, look, I had the right mentor or right person at the right time to kind of like be outside of me and just point out like, oh, we'll just combine them. And I think that is a lot often how people find that niche for them is they're like, oh, I have these different things, and someone's like, all right, just do both of them, or here's what it would look like.
Yeah. And or do that process of again talking to your clients or self-examining and asking, where do I think I can be most helpful? What lights me up about, this or that, or providing value in this way? And then don't be afraid to explicitly say, I coach these people to do this thing. I think the riches are in the niches. I would much rather work with a very focused coach to do a certain thing than a generalist coach who like may or may not help me become a better version of myself in some unquantifiable way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think a great example too of that is the retreat where we met. So like Susan Piver had a retreat which was like the Buddhist Enneagram based on a book she wrote that combined meditation and Buddhism with Enneagram, which is this personality typing system that I'm really into. It's like okay, those are the two things that have made the biggest difference in my life. So of course I'm going to go to this retreat. Now it may not be a, 100,000 person retreat because it's a niche, but it's fine. You charge enough and it's worth everyone's time and you go and you do it. So
Yeah. Like to be the only person who does this thing or to be the one who's known the most for doing that. I sort of lucked out because I think I've had the top spot on the search rankings for funny copywriter for a few years now. And I'm like, I don't you can come and take it away from me because I never blog anymore, but please don't. Um, but I kind of lucked into that. But there are so many other spaces if you can find that Venn diagram of like what I enjoy and what people will pay for and like claim that claim this little weird thing in the middle.
for sure. Um, do you know of any, it's okay if the answer is just like no. Do you know of any copywriting type philosophies that actually speak to different personality types? And it might not be Enneagram, it might be something else, but sort of like want to have one email, because I've heard before people saying like have an email that speaks to the very analytical
Mhm.
decision making process, have an email that speaks to the very emotional decision making process. So I'm not sure if you ever think about that in sales letters or emails, like I'm speaking to different personalities in this copy.
Not so much. Not so much different personalities. The closest thing that makes me think of is stages of awareness.
Hmm.
Should we quickly go?
Yeah, let's talk about that. I think that's helpful for people.
Okay. So Eugene Schwartz is like one of the OG copywriters, and he wrote about this. And so basically, there are stages of awareness that people can have about you or your service, ranging from totally unaware to super most aware, like knowing that you exist, thinking about buying from you. And you need to think about the types of information that people need at different points in that process to get them from unaware to most aware. So like unaware, they it's hard because they don't even know they have a problem, right? So you're probably writing content around like, what if you're struggling with this thing? And that's very much in the top of funnel. That's where content lives. That's where SEO lives. That's where social media lives. Then there's um, somewhat aware. They're like, oh, I do have a problem, but they're not ready to like look for stuff to fix it. Then there is product aware. I'm messing all of this up, but there's like 5 stages. Basically, they come to be aware that they have an issue, that there are ways to solve it, that you are one of the ways they could solve it, and then they find you. Um,
Yeah.
so I write to those stages, trying to give them just the information they need. The sales page for each of those stages is going to be like much longer up here because you have to do all the work of education around like you have this problem, here's what it looks like, here's how to recognize it, here's why it's so terrible, here's what you can do about it. And then they're going to go away and like do some more research for a while, or they might get on your email list in a year.
Hmm.
But like when they're down here, they're so ready to buy, all you have to do is get out of their way. So it's a very short page that's like, yep, save my spot. Does that make sense?
That
Yeah.
makes a ton of sense. So we just a colleague and I just launched a 12-week group program called Weeks That Work. And it's basically like both of us have taught marketing and sales for a while. And what we noticed was that people would learn the marketing and sales, but then as an entrepreneur, you still have to go execute it. Like you still have to know like when in my week am I doing this? And you have to like be consistent with a marketing strategy until you get traction with it. And so we were like envisioning this sort of productivity, high performance, like time management type program. But we were like, I don't know if people are actually thinking that that's the problem. We know people want just to get clients. Like we know that that sells. We had to spend a lot more time on the sales page at the front end being like, if you want next year to be your most profitable year, like here's what's happening, here's what would need to change, and then introducing like, okay, that's what this thing does.
Yeah.
And it did ultimately like we've had great registrations with it, but I think if we didn't frame the problem for people who are problem unaware up front, it wouldn't have sold as much.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Like I tend to go very directly to the psychology because I think everyone's interested in how their own brains work. And so a lot of the stuff that I write, especially for a recent client, is around like, this is how your brain works. It's tricking you in these ways. Here is how what we've built helps you untrick your brain or get around that. And so for me, I would probably have written that page being like, you're afraid of doing this. You don't know it yet, but accountability will help you get around the fear and like build some momentum. And that's why we've built this
Mm,
program to help you sit down and ship it.
I like that. It
Yeah.
makes sense. Cool. Anything else people should know It's a very broad question. Anything else people should know about why their copy might not be converting? Like, if they just if this isn't working, the sales page isn't working. Like, where are the first things they should look at?
I would look at the offer, honestly. Is there any confusion in the offer? Uh, because people won't tell you; they'll just sort of slip away. That's assuming that your sales page is asking them to do something. Um, but yeah, usually to me that comes back to like product market fit. Like, did you actually build something that people want, or did you just build it because you thought it was cool?
Yeah, I think that's a good distinction is like, if something's selling, but you want it to sell better, then there may be some improvements in the copy. If something's just not selling, like probably people don't want it, at least in the way it's currently conceptualized, or you'd at least be getting some people who are like, look, this sales page sucks, but I still want the thing, so I'm gonna buy it.
Yeah, like if the product is actually if the problem they're trying to solve is actually worth solving, that's one thing. But if you're solving a problem that no one cares about, like it's probably not the right
Hmm.
problem to
I
solve.
think it might have been maybe it's just because you mentioned Eugene Schwartz. I don't know if this is his quote, but there was some sort of like old school advertising person who was like, "Look, let's be honest. We can't create demand with any of this stuff that we're advertising for. We can only take something that has a lot of like, you know, kind of burning desire for something, and we can channel it to our thing, but we can't make someone want something that they don't want."
Yeah, I'm sure that was like Ogilvy or someone. I don't know, one of the
It
big
may have been. It may have
Hopkins,
been.
Schwartz, and Ogilvy.
The last thing I'm curious about that I want your take on is headlines because my take has always been like you're not going to spend the same amount of time on each part of your copy, and I always spend a lot of my time on the headline just with the assumption that if people don't get through that, if it doesn't hook them, I don't get an opportunity for the rest of the copy. Is that how
Mhm.
you see it, or do you see it slightly differently? Like, what's the importance that you put on a headline?
Definitely super important because you're right. If they don't read the headline, they won't read the next thing. Like every sentence's job is to get you to the next sentence. So every sentence has to earn its keep. Headlines in particular. I think of them more as sort of markers, like that should tell the bare bones of the story down the page. So again, if you back away from 3 feet and read just the headlines or the crossheads, do you know what the page is about? Do you know the story that it's telling? Um,
Hmm.
can be hard when you have like more conversational headlines like you might be having this problem dot dot dot, and then there's a body copy that talks about the problem, then the next headline is dot dot dot, but are you doing anything about it? Well, you haven't told me what the problem is in the headline. So I think specificity and then using a little bit of that like almost clickbaity style approach where it's like this is interesting enough that I'm going to read the next thing. Like how would you write your
Curiosity,
line? Huh?
like just curiosity.
Yeah, curiosity, opening that loop, making them need to read what's coming next, but also previewing what's in that section so that they get a sense of like they can just skim the headlines and know what the offer is.
Yeah, that makes sense. So like having having your sort of logic or your argument or your outline be represented by those headings. Did you say crossheads? Well, I've never heard that term.
Oh
What is
yeah,
that?
I think Joanna Weeb says crossheads or crossheaders sometimes.
Is,
Just
is that like a
headlines.
subheadline?
Like a what?
Is that like a subheadline or
I think it's just like your main. You have your main hero headline in the hero section, then you have your crossheads down the page. Like could
got
be
it?
could be side to side. I don't know. I think it just means sub headline.
Got it.
Yeah, I
Yeah, I
use.
often find that like writing headlines, especially the main one at the top of a page or a subject line, it's tricky because to create that curiosity, there's sort of a balance between you have to be specific enough, but also vague enough to create the curiosity. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Do you have formulas that you use for headlines or just ways that you think about it that help you generate some ideas that you choose between?
A lot of the time I just do a placeholder headline until I write that section, and then I see like what piece of the section is most interesting, and can I turn
Ooh,
that into a headline? Yeah. So I'll write like headline about this thing, and then I'll go write the body copy, and maybe I'll come up with a cool metaphor in the body copy, and then I'll be like, the trap of blah blah blah. Um,
ooh, that makes sense. Yeah, I've found that too when I review copy for clients, usually there's a part that's interesting, but it's like, I don't know,
It's
a
very,
third of the way in. I'm like, this is the interesting part. So sometimes it's like
yeah,
pull that up for the headline, and sometimes I'm just like, just start here. Cut
that's another,
everything above
it's
that.
a copywriting trick, right? And same for like screenwriting. Like we tend to sort of warm up until we get to the interesting thing. And so if you just cut all the preamble after you write that, like boom, you're in medias res, you're in the action. And then you
Mm,
might find a line in there.
love it. Awesome. Leanna, thank you for these tips. They were fire. They were so good. And where should people go next? I think it probably depends on who's watching it. There's
Yeah.
potential clients, probably. There's other coaches who just want to get better at copy. What's a good next step for people?
They can hang out with me at punchlinecopy.com, or if they're on TikTok, I'm starting a TikTok. Oh my God, why?
Ooh,
At Punchline Copy, and I'm doing like 1 minute to 30-second copy critiques. So that'll help you get better at copy.
that's fun. That's cool.
And I actually don't write for coaches most of the time. I will take a few exceptions here and there, but if they want to find a copywriter, I know all the best ones. So
Good.
that's my terrible Donald Trump impression. A tremendous one's amazing. Such a
So good. The best. Um, awesome. Thank you so much. This was great.
thank you.
All right. Talk soon.